July 4th, 1982. Armed police shoot cop killer Barry Prudom. The biggest manhunt in Britain is at an end.
The final chapter in the life of Barry Peter Edwards, alias Prudom, has focused on the events surrounding his death on a sports ground only yards from the centre of Malton in North Yorkshire. The inquest heard that an armed police team approached a lean-to where they believed someone was hiding. A single shot rang out. Police took cover and repeated calls were made for the man to give himself up. There was no response, and Chief Inspector Clarkson gave the order to open fire. When I went to the inquest and heard the evidence, one could understand why the police acted in the way that they did, but standing here now, one knows that it simply wouldn't happen in that way today, and that Barry Prudom, I suspect, would have been in court to stand trial.
Barry Prudom died in a crude hideout on the edge of Malton Tennis and Bowls Club. The police barrage was prompted by a single shot from Prudom, which later proved to be to his own head. If Prudom had stood trial, it would have been for multiple murder. Over a fortnight, Prudom shot 3 police officers and a retired couple. June 17, 1982, Warren Point, North Yorkshire. Prudom, on the run from an assault charge, was approached by local bobby PC David Haig. Prudom shot him in the head.
At the spot where PC Haig's body was found, close to his Panda car near Norwood Edge, a similar car was parked in the hope of jogging the memory of drivers who passed on the morning of the murder. In a 3-hour period, 300 cars were stopped and drivers were shown the photo-fit picture of the wanted man.
Prudom fled south to Newark and killed again. On June 23rd, George Luckett died and his wife was severely injured when Prudom burgled their home. He returned to North Yorkshire to hide out in the dense Dalby Forest. June 25th, police dog handler Ken Oliver had the misfortune to approach him and was shot in the back. Now the manhunt went into full swing. Robert Hall, then a young calendar reporter, was scrambled from Leeds to cover the story.
This particular patrol, out ahead of the main search parties, had decided to use a Forestry Commission tower as a vantage point for their sharpshooters. It's 4:30 in the morning and we're with one of the armed police squads that have been on duty in the forest throughout the night. We stumbled across a clearing in the forest where 2 tracks crossed, and there was a fire control tower there and a couple of unmarked police cars, I think from North Yorkshire, and marksmen in the process of climbing up these towers. And around us there were other marksmen crouching in the trees. The fact that they're all armed with loaded weapons and covering one another indicates just how serious the situation in the forest is. You can hear the trepidation in my voice because it was scary. We were surrounded by policemen with guns. For all we knew, Prudom was in the trees with whatever firearms he had, and we were a target. But it didn't happen. It's now mid-afternoon and this is the scene in Dalby Forest. Police are now regrouping to begin a major search elsewhere in the area. There are more and more heavily armed police, and although no direct information is being given out at this stage, the obvious assumption that we're drawing is that senior officers believe the man they're hunting is still in the area.
But in the mist, Prudom eludes the ever-increasing numbers of police searchers. He headed south on foot and on June 28th boldly walked into the market town of Malton. Tragically, it was one of the only unarmed officers in the area who saw him and approached him. Prudom drew his gun, chased the officer across the road and callously shot him in the head. The Chief Constable, Kenneth Henshaw, informed the press on the lawn of the local police station.
The following described man was sighted at approximately 2:10 p.m. He was later stopped and checked by Sergeant Winters, and the incident took place in a field in Old Malton. The man is described as being white, early 30s, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, slim build, thin-faced, sallow complexion, high cheekbones, with 2 days' growth of beard. A man of this description was reported to have been seen running along Yorkers Gate, Malton, and a search took place.
Prudom's escape route is blocked by the river, and there's an army of police on his heels. But he found a disused railway cutting in a place known locally as Willow Wood. It goes in the wrong direction, taking him back past the police search parties. But extraordinarily, he made it. Going under the road bridge next to the police station, he scrambled up the opposite bank of the cutting to what became his final hiding place. Malton Tennis and Bowls Club. Sleepy Malton is now the centre of a national story. The police have discovered the name of the killer and know now he's trained in survival tactics.
He's a very dangerous man. He's a man who has got no regard for human life at all. He's a cold-blooded killer.
Peter Walker, then the police press officer, was more used to dealing with local journalists and minor incidents. Suddenly, he's got a press pack on his back, asking why, after nearly 2 weeks, ever-increasing numbers of officers can't find a man who appears every few days, kills at will, and then melts away.
Initially, there were 450 officers deployed searching the forest, but once it was after Ken Oliver was attacked, it was when Sergeant David Winter was shot in Malton, that really the hunt intensified by calling in more officers. And then I think at one point there were 800 engaged in the search.
And you've got more armed men?
Yes, we have.
Why is that?
Again, the area is larger, so we do need a greater strength in the area, and we need these swift response teams as well, who will go out to investigate various incidents around the county. Every incident I ought to add is investigated by a team of armed men now.
The manhunt is getting nowhere, but it was Walker's job to be confident, even though he knew every policeman in the area was a potential target.
We're very confident, yes. The indications are that we are getting nearer, and that there's an air of confidence in the police station today.
It looks like he's going to go out in a blaze of what he thought was glory. So he would not surrender. And I think, from what we gathered, he intended taking as many police officers with him as he could before he went.
It's now 7 o'clock in the morning, and the police operation, which has already been underway for some 2 hours, is moving into top gear. Everyone is on the alert. Even the smallest incident is thoroughly checked. Why have you asked the policeman to come and help you this morning?
Because I found some footmarks from our garden to the next door.
It must be quite scary, knowing that this man could be right around your house.
Oh, I'm only hoping they'll find him. I keep looking around myself.
But none of the leads take the police nearer Prudom. Days pass and no progress is made. Even so, journalists have to file stories. Robert Hall found another angle at the local newspaper.
Instead of the usual news of council rows, agriculture and local events, the news department here are faced with one of the biggest stories the area has ever seen.
It's a very quiet area, it's normally. You know, I can get in touch with the police regularly and nothing, you know, odd stolen car and this kind of thing, but very little happening. And this has obviously just turned everything inside out.
My only aim as a journalist was only ever to report what had happened, not to try to make it happen. But it seemed to me at the press conferences that I went up to, the police there, that there was a bit of a struggle to keep the story interesting, because this man had, you know, it was like a rabbit, he'd gone down a hole.
Just as the trail seemed to have gone completely cold, a single shot rang out near the police station. Was Prudom at large again? This time the press, as well as the police, were in the firing line.
Our photographer, I remember, dragged me down to knee level, saying, "You're going to get shot, get your head down." And I thought, no, I'm not. This is not real. You know, that can't happen. It's not going to happen. When I switched the TV on at night when I got there. There's Nicholas Witchell standing there doing his piece to camera, talking about bullets whistling round his ears, you know. And we found out later that the only shot that was fired by the police that day, it actually was an inspector who'd accidentally let off a gun through the roof of the police van. So I don't know where good old Nicholas got his bullets whistling round his ears from.
Whether out of desperation or simply to take police out of the firing line, the Chief Constable accepted the offer of help from a civilian, ex-SAS man Eddie McGee.
I now have the services of an expert who has extensive knowledge of the art of tracking, and he is now busy. He's found certain marks which give us confidence that he's on the right trail.
McGee's task isn't easy. He's helicoptered to every sighting, dogged by journalists and frustrated by every location being trampled over.
I concentrate like bloody hell, we really are. Because this bastard's going round and round in circles, and on top of that, everybody else is calling us in all directions. So give these blokes a chance.
Are you sure they are?
Our job is to get this bastard, isn't it? One way or the other.
Prudom was still safe in his hideout. In the end, it will be McGee who finds him there. Anything like the Prudom manhunt, it turned the town from rural idyll into hostile inner city as the police put it under siege. Even the gentle thud of willow on leather was suspended for the duration.
You have to remember this is a really sleepy little North Yorkshire town in the middle of July, and suddenly all this happens. I mean, for example, this cricket pitch, you'd expect the cricket team would have been playing here, but everything stopped because this became an impromptu airfield. Pilots and response teams are growing used to an operation which closely resembles the scrambles so well known by the RAF. An alert which often follows a phone call from a member of the public is flashed to Malton police station, and from there by radio to this control caravan. There were sightings all the time, so these helicopters would go up with marksmen on board and they would head off and circle the area that had been identified. To my memory, 2 or 3 helicopters in and out of here, including one that the Metropolitan Police had brought in. Is this the sort of work you'd normally be doing?
Yes, it's very much akin to what we do in London, looking for suspects, persons concerned in crime, and searching areas as necessary.
Of course, you're in a new area. The terrain is new certainly to one of your pilots and to you. Is that presenting any problems for you?
They're going.
Can we go in and get some coordinates?
Yes.
Right.
But of course they were searching in the wrong place. The tennis club is just over the road from the cricket ground. In the old vicarage next to Prudom's hideout, Dennis and Ian Reid were unaware of their new neighbour. Dennis followed events on the police radio, while his son Ian, then Malton's mayor, helped the police with local information from his office at the water board behind the police station.
Policemen arrived with shotguns, with no protective clothing. It was only when they started bringing the big police authorities in, like Manchester and Newcastle and South Yorkshire and metropolitan areas, where they had special firearms units. And that was later on. But up till that point, it was just your normal heartbeat Bobby with a gun.
It was a group, without being rude, a group of amateurs. It would be sighted all over the place. A scarecrow was sighted, and they sent a helicopter to look at it and found it was a scarecrow. Well, it should never have been reported. It was, I don't know whether it was over-enthusiasm or just an attempt to see a bit of action in our corner, you know.
Under certain rather mysterious circumstances, I thought at the time, the Chief Constable of Manchester sent his chauffeur-driven car, which came to the water board, not the police station, and he opened the boot and it was full of Armalite rifles, which I recognised. There was some pretty awesome firepower.
People had never seen 1,000 policemen all at once before, never mind all the sophisticated armoury, and, you know, it was quite something for Malton.
Good morning.
Nice morning.
It is, it is. You're off shopping, are you?
No, I'm going to open my house out, you see. I'm locked up. See if there's any mail for me. And, you see, both windows, so we've coupled up. I came up here to sleep, you see, and then I'm going down just to draw the curtains and see if all's okay and see if I've got a letter from my family.
Are you happy wandering down there on your own?
Why, someone's going with me, ain't they?
You'd like me to come?
Yes.
OK.
Just to see me into the...
Have you been worried at night? Have you managed to get any sleep?
Well, night before last, I never closed my eyes, but I've had a better night because I took a sleeping tablet last night and we had early night and there we are.
What do you think to this man that they're all looking for?
Oh, I don't know. If I had a gun, I would shoot him.
The press had dubbed the Prudom story the Siege of Malton, and it was a siege that affected everyone's lives.
What struck us as journalists, and when you think about the way they deal with firearms things now, was that it was all felt a bit chaotic, to be honest.
It was a bit unnerving when you went out in a pickup like we did. You would get to Old Malton and you'd be stopped, and there'd be a policeman there with a gun pointing at you and a man with a clipboard. Who are you? Who are you working for? Where are you going? What time do you expect to be back? I can see that gun now with the man's trigger on, and I don't know, it was a bit iffy.
And you suddenly have a helicopter following you around until you end up at your own house. And when you think about it, in July, the amount of undergrowth and the amount of stuff that's growing here, you could last for a long, long time.
It all seemed to revolve around where he'd been supposedly seen last.
Yeah, because they were dashing about.
Yeah.
They kept getting these reports. I remember these convoys of police cars all dashing out, then they'd come back and out again.
Well, a lot of people were saying, get down into Willowwood, weren't they? Yeah. It'll be down at Willowwood, go down into Willowwood, but no, they wouldn't.
The only place they didn't look, where they should have looked, was under that railway bridge up Old Malton Road, within 50 yards at police station.
I walked every day across the railway cutting and on my way to a police press conference, and I'd look over it, and every day I thought to myself, that's a great place to hide. But unlike, TV reporters in dramas, I did nothing about it. I didn't even mention it to anybody, And that's the very place where he was.
Prudom emerged from hiding just once. On July 3rd, he walked 50 yards to a house behind the tennis club where he'd been stealing cat food from an outbuilding to survive. He took a family hostage for 12 hours, but they talked to him, made him tea and sandwiches. He left them alive, thanked them for what he called his last supper, and returned to his hideout. Next morning, McGee followed his tracks, and they led straight to his den.
And I went forward on my hands, feeling the ground, until I saw this little bit of a blue plastic bag, what looked like a plastic bag, just casually move to one side. And I didn't pay too much attention to it because I was actually looking for tracks. And I went forward, I changed probes like that. I put my hand forward to lift up this probe, and as I put my hand just inside this rough shelter where the wood was, suddenly the foot flew back, and the foot hit me on the knee, sent me strolling back. And I jumped up in the air, the officer was over there, and I didn't shout, I said, he's there.
It wasn't McGee's job to tackle Prudom. That task fell to Chief Inspector David Clarkson and his team of 4 firearms specialists from West Yorkshire.
I put a containment round him, firearms containment round him, myself being the pistol. My second was with the shotgun, and further back with the rifle was the sniper. There was no, positive evidence to say that the man behind that screen was in fact Prudom. Nobody had seen him. So it wasn't up to me to go in, even though it killed 3 people, it wasn't up to me then to go in and say, look, give yourself up or you're dead. There's a ravine there, which I think come from the old railway sidings. Next thing we know is North Yorkshire suddenly come up at the side of us, right in our line of fire, should anything go wrong. We discovered that the North Yorkshire firearms response teams was on a different wavelength to ourselves, so consequently we couldn't talk to them. Absolutely frightening. I decided that I would go round the back to a wall, so it got me behind the wall where the lean-to was was obviously leaning. And looking over the wall, and as I'm stretched, because it's a fairly thick stone wall, as I'm stretched over the wall, boom, the shot went off. Now I, for one, thought he was at me. And so I dropped down, obviously, frightened to death. A stun grenade was dropped in, but it made no difference, none whatsoever. So again, I spoke to Prudom, as it turned out to be. I said, look, give yourself up, and let's talk things through, just trying to get him communicating. Nothing happened, and it might seem a long time, but this is a matter of a minute at the most. And so I thought, right, fire. So my shotgun man fired. And at the same time, of course, the North Yorkshire officers fired as well. Everybody gets hyped up and the adrenaline flows. It's no different to any other job. When the adrenaline flows. Yeah. And the trauma of dealing with a thing like that is something that I don't wish anybody to experience. No.
When the jury returned, their verdict of suicide was unanimous. As police fired at him, Barry Peter Edwards had been dead. Summing up, Coroner Michael Oakley thanked police and public, and he closed with a comment directed at all the families connected with the case. We should not forget, he said, all those who've suffered and will continue to suffer after this inquest has been closed. I think there's a feeling of, obviously a feeling of sadness for his victims, but I think there's also a feeling of regret, certainly as a journalist, that you never heard his story, you never heard why this had happened, what had happened in this man's life to turn him and make him do these dreadful things. Now, we all wanted to know that, and I suppose, in a way, we felt cheated.
We knew that he was a killer. We knew that you couldn't take a risk with him. And that's why, at the end of the day, I wasn't prepared to take a risk. I know other people have different ideas, but that's what I thought, yeah.